My name is Ina, and today I'll be talking about the French and English influence on Canadian Indigenous cuisine. To start with some geographical facts, Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories. The population is 37 million, which is about the size of California, and it is also the second largest country by land with 3.8 million square miles. This means that a lot of the land is forestry with many lakes and big coastlines. And because there are so many provinces, there's a lot of different cultural influences and traditions in each province. Some local ingredients that are native to Canada include maple, maize, pumpkin, wild fruits, and various animals such as turkeys and partridge. The history of Indigenous cuisine in Canada dates back thousands of years, with various communities having their own food traditions. Again, because Canada is such a large territory, each place really specialized in having their own certain foods and ways of preparation. And then with the arrival of French and English settlers in the 17th and 18th centuries, this brought changes to Indigenous cuisine, leading to a fusion of traditional and European techniques merging into one or combining for many recipes. I've also provided a very brief timeline of Canadian settlements, including the influx of French and British settlers around the 1700s, and also I wanted to know the Canadian split of Upper Canada with more English settlers and Lower Canada with more French settlers, and I've provided a map of where those territories were. And this is important because this ends up influencing the different types of foods that were present in those regions. Because Canada is a multicultural country, this is very reflective in its food culture as well. Some of the cultural groups that have influenced Canadian cuisine are the Indigenous peoples of Canada, including First Nations, Iroquois, Inuit, and Métis. And other groups include Jewish migrants, French migrants, North European migrants, and East European migrants, along with many more. The reason why it's important to know the diverse background of Canadian history is because all of these groups have contributed to a very rich food culture that is present in that country. This also relates to why I chose to do this topic, which is that I've always been interested in the combination of food influences that have led to such unique recipes in Canada, such as poutine, but I've never known as much about the origin behind how did these recipes come to be and why are they so different from anything anywhere else. So by choosing this topic, I learned more about the rich history of Canada and how it was influenced by so many different cultural groups. Because Canada has such a cold climate and also very distinct seasons, this really influenced the food availability depending on the time of the year. For example, there was the concept of seasonal foods, which meant that wild game would be eaten in the summer, where more people would hunt, versus in the winter, there would be larger consumption of domesticated farm animals instead. Another interesting thing is that availability of food varied by region as well. So geographically, if people were living closer to the coastline, they would have more availability to seafood, versus if they were in a more forestry area, there would be more game meat available. These harsh winters that were in Canada also played a crucial role in Indigenous cuisine, where there were preserving techniques such as smoking, drying, and fermentation that were being used to preserve food for the winter months. And this will come up later as well, but it's sort of a difference between using the local resources and preservation of food for the winter, as opposed to the idea of having domesticated animals and farmland to rely on the winter as well. Some of the indigenous foods that were present in Canada, particularly in the Saskatchewan province, are bannock, which is the first photo, and it's a type of fried flatbread. And then also moose, elk, deer, and bison were hunted as part of a source of meat. Pemmican is the second photo, and that is a type of sweet dessert that was prevalent. Maple taffy, and also métis stew, which is the lowest photo. And one thing that all these recipes have in common is that they all use local ingredients, like wild game, fish, berries, and vegetables that were available in that area. And this is a very common theme with most of the indigenous foods in Canada. It was very reliant on whatever was available in that area, and it was also very focused on meat as well. The fusion of indigenous cuisine with French culinary traditions led to the creation of some dishes that are very unique to Canada. Some of these fusions include tarte à sucre, which is maple syrup pie featured in the first photo. Another one is poutine, which is the national dish of Canada, and I think one of the most staple foods of Canada as well. It is made of French fries, gravy, and cheese curds. Then there's tuterie, which is a meat pie made with wild game meat and potatoes. And then relating to the previous slide, we have pemmican pudding, which uses indigenous ingredients and is the same concept as the pemmican dessert. However, it is now transformed into a type of pudding, which is the French influence. A lot of these dishes are prevalent all over Canada, but particularly in the Quebec province, where French is the most spoken language. Another type of influence is relevant in cooking, such as new ingredients that were brought over like wheat flour, dairy, and potatoes, and also new techniques for cooking like sauté and frying meat and fish, and not just smoky. So some of the British influence varies in a very interesting way from the French influence, where many British migrants stuck to the recipes that they were familiar with, either from Britain or America, and they mostly only modified the ingredients of those recipes to fit whatever was available in that region in Canada. So, for example, there's stuffed roast turkey, roast duck, fish and chips made with halibut, which is a fish that is present in the Canadian coastlines, apple pie, and bread pudding. Another interesting cultural difference is that rather than relying on local resources and hunting for wild game, many British migrants had their own farms and domesticated animals, and they tried to rely on that. And then with the introduction of more trade connections, they tried to get those same types of international recipes and ingredients as they would if they were in Britain. Another interesting thing is that some new ingredients that were brought over are tea, sugar, and canned goods, or the concept of canning goods as preservation, and also some traditions like afternoon tea, which are still present in Vancouver today. And finally, here is the slide featuring all of my resources. Thank you for listening.